Hey traders, Ragi here, decaffeinated Ragi here. It's early Friday morning and I'm taking a look at the markets leading into non-farm payroll. And I wanted to record a quick video to walk through what I'm watching across the dollar, the Dow, Fed Fund futures, as well as specifically the June contract, by the way, Fed Fund futures, gold, and even crude, because crude oil is something that, while fairly unrelated, it's kind of doing its own thing. I am interested in getting long. So just a quick run through the Forextra, as well as a look at what it is that traders are expecting for this non-farm payroll. So first of all, let's head on over to the economic calendar here and talk about what the expectations are. As you can see here, kind of interesting morning in that we have the ISM non-manufacturing PMI coming out at 10, but that's going to be after the market, more or less goes berserk at 8:30. Expectations are for the jobs numbers to come in at 159. Now, what's interesting about that is I've seen numbers where there's some expectation of a downside disappointment. And when I look at the way in which this market's perceiving what's going to happen with NFP, I think you have to fast forward into the calendar, because up until the middle of last week, Janet Yellen was going to get that award at Harvard, which she did, Radcliffe Day, whatever that was. And we thought that would be it. We would hear from her, and then that would be it until June 15, which put all that more emphasis on NFP and whether or not the FOMC would lean on the labor market again to justify any rate hike. Now, obviously, this rate hike conversation around, whether they will or won't for June is still raging on. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the June Fed Fund futures have said no, and they've been resoundingly no for a really long time. So now we've got non-farm payroll. However, we also have this added event on June the 6th. So on June the 6th, I remember seeing this on Bloomberg the middle of last week. So she's going to be in Philadelphia June the 6th. So that's probably going to be even more important than non-farm payroll, because she'll be able to speak to the market basically, about a week before the decision, but also after NFP to give us a little bit more insight into what she thought the number meant. So I think if we look at ISM data, and then we look at, say, the ADP data, and we look to try to glean what it is maybe that this NFP may do, I'm still thinking maybe a bit of a downside surprise. And again, I don't know that that's going to be a huge game changer either way, because we're going to say to ourselves, all right, thanks so much. It's June 3rd. And on the 6th, on Monday, we'll hear from Janet Yellen. So I can kind of see the market having its reaction, and then, as it often can do on NFP, just kind of go sideways into what I endearingly call guillotine syndrome. I mean, who's really going to want to stick their neck out in front of the weekend and in front of Janet Yellen on Monday? So a couple things, again, to focus on: average hourly earnings. That's been something we focus on, not just the headline number. That's been now the new popular kid in class. What are our average hourly earnings? Oftentimes we've kind of gleaned over and just kind of zoned out, really, the headline number, because I think it's probably going to be fairly flat. And we're trying to decide whether or not Janet Yellen's going to like what she sees. So the thing to watch is this. Ultimately, I think we're going to look to see how much job contribution we've seen for the manufacturing sector, because the market PMI basically is contradicting some of what the ADP said. So I'll be watching that closely. What else? I'm actually just looking through my notes right now. What else do I like? Well, you know what? Here's the bottom line. Let's take a look at the Forextra and just see how the market's prepared for all this. And one of the things that I want to do between now, June the 3rd, maybe June the 6th, if I want to take advantage of Janet Yellen as the catalyst on Monday, which I'm leaning more and more towards. the 12:30 p.m. Eastern Monday event. Can I play basically June 3rd and or June 6th into June 14 and focus on some of these fresh trends that are emerging in the dollar index, fresh trends that are emerging in the Euro US. And I think this area gets kind of interesting. Bottom line of the wave and what looks to be a fresh 4 to 6 o'clock angle. Will I see the market fade this 1200 area on gold? Because while I don't believe gold is heading back up to 13, I think we have one more rally left in gold, which as of now is really going to be more of a correction as far as I'm concerned. If we can get a pop in gold heading to the bottom line of the wave, that'll be a nice move from this 1220, 1205 area up to 1240, maybe even up to about 1255, 1260. But I think ultimately that's going to be heading lower, because if we don't think we're going to get the hike in June, that actually just increases the likelihood that we'll see the hike in something like September. And in yesterday's premium video to SFXers, one of the things that I noted, which was kind of interesting, and I saw this when I was Google News surfing this event, is that I think Janet Yellen passed on Jackson Hole last year, and she's going to attend this year. So, it makes me wonder, is she prepping the market for September? And that August, September has been something that, even though August would be a quirky month to talk about in terms of a rate hike, this has actually looked more realistic than June. It's looked a little bit more realistic than a summer move. As we come out of the summer, she makes an appearance in Jackson Hole, and maybe that's going to be part of the strategy to prepare the market for later year, a single rate hike. And that's it. I'm still looking at a single rate hike. So NFP's main job here is to maybe give us one more clue before Monday's event as to whether or not she can feel comfortable leaning on the improving labor market to hike rates like they did last year. Because then you have someone like Charles Evan come out, FOMC member, and says, look, we probably shouldn't do anything till we actually have a 2% inflation. And that was kind of what traders thought for a long time, that Janet Yellen would want a minimum 2% inflation. And the reality is, when they hiked last year, all they are looking for is that it's possible to get there. Well, then why have the mandate anyways? It's a wish list. And if the mandate is a wish list, I think that's why the market's so jittery. Because before, we knew labor improvement, one mandate, and 2% inflation, main mandate. And it doesn't matter that we don't have it. Yes, it doesn't matter. So that's why I think this labor data becomes so much a factor as to will they or won't they. I think the Dow is preparing for a potential move to and through 18,000, especially if, not today, but especially if non-farm payroll is perhaps disappointing, and if that suggests that they won't hike on the 15th. If they don't hike on the 15th, that's where I expect these rips higher in the Dow and in gold. And that's where I want to take advantage of a pullback in the dollar index to buy it, and also a rally in the euro to sell it. So again, the same watch list that I'm going to have after the FOMC is going to be things like Euro US, dollar index, Aussie US, Euro pound. Even right now, we have the open trade in Aussie Canada, which is the second video that I've included in today's email. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. That's what I'm looking for. Just kind of randomly going through my notes, some of the things that I'll be expecting some clarity on. But unlike that last event at Harvard, where there was a lot of emphasis there may be even less emphasis on this non-farm payroll, because I do suspect it could come in flat. And even if it doesn't, even if it surprises one way or the other, Janet Yellen's going to be hitting the mic on Monday, and we're going to know, we're going to want to know, because we have the luxury of knowing what she thinks of this number. And then maybe the real discounting into the 15th starts with that 12:30 event. So a whole lot of non-farm payroll conversation coming up in the chat here in about an hour and a half. Okay, take care.